The following program is a Media One Cable 27 special presentation.
I think probably the description of one of our earliest superintendents, and actually he was the longest sitting superintendent in the history of our town, explains North Attleborough and its educational system. This man was appointed superintendent in 1918. His name was George Winfield Morris. And our historians say that he was a man for the times. He was cautious. He was prudent, given more tradition than innovation. He went about his business with glacial calm, issuing reassuring annual reports and conservative educational bromides. And those of you who have lived in the community for a number of years know that's how we can describe our educational system. We have been prudent.
North Attleborough's school's space needs were well documented since the middle of the 1980s. An independent consultant pointed out in 1987 and 1988 that the town would be experiencing a space crunch as it headed into the 1990s. In February of 1989, a planning committee was established by town meeting and recommended a new school to handle its projections. By 1991, the school committee decided to approach representative town meeting with a request for funds to design a $22 million middle school. The school committee based its hopes of securing the funding on the state school building assistance program, which allows for 72% reimbursement of funds spent on the building of a school.
Enrollments this year were 136 students more than last year, and that growth will continue at the elementary level. We're already in an overcrowding condition at the elementary level. We're using storage rooms, we're using cafeterias, we're using libraries, auditoriums at the elementary level for classrooms. So we find ourselves, as we look 10 years down the road, that we're in need of 1,200 seats.
We have to move quickly because it's 3 years down the line until we open the doors of that school, one, and we will have a need for between 6 and 12, perhaps, classrooms 3 years from now. But most importantly, the state, at this point in time, will pick up 72 cents on every dollar that is spent on a new school, and the town will only pay 28 cents on that dollar. And that ratio is going to disappear on June 30th.
My feeling was, and I think many people, we don't disagree with the fact that we need more space. We need to know that we can afford to build this. And we hired a company who could work on the projections, so we had very accurate projections of students who would be coming through the system and being able to present this to the public. And we also hired a CPA firm to come in and prepare what was then called the Hughes report, which was a projection of revenues and expenses. The question was, can we afford this? And there were just too many answers.
The new school had been talked about for many years. One of the problems was when I had first gotten onto the finance committee, the way that the budgets were done basically is that town departments would come before the finance committee, put their proposed budget in. The finance committee would review it, then they would sit back and then review what they thought they were going to have for revenue that year, and whatever the difference was, they would cut and go back to each one of the departments and say, all right, this is how much money you have. And there was never any real financial plan. There was no planning being done. There was no forecast being done. There was no capital plan at that point in time.
The RTM, or Representative Town Meeting, voted down the school committee's request and instead set up a study committee to consider various options in addressing the space needs. From there, a school building committee was established and developed a plan which included at one time to expand 3 already existing elementary schools, as well as renovating the junior high school. Tax overrides were needed for these plans to be accomplished, and after 2 failed override votes, these plans were shelved. It was finally in March of 1994 that the Martin School addition was approved at the cost of $6 million. While town meeting approved the Martin addition, it rejected the Finance Committee's proposal for a new $15 million middle school. New school proponents were frustrated.
School committee at that point, through the committee, the subcommittee, reviewed the population and the needs and how we were going to put those children, and even existing children, never mind projected ones, and recommended to the full school committee to go to town meeting and request approval for a new middle school, which at that time, just very roughly, was going to handle 1,300 students, be subject to 72% reimbursement. And the dollar amount that at that point that was used was just a rough guideline based on so many square foot per student, and that would have to be developed more fully, but we knew the ballpark that we were in at that point.
When the proposal was brought up in March, I mean, we could have funded the $15 million at 72% reimbursement, but that it didn't solve the whole picture, nor did it solve the whole problem. There was still some questions on the finances, still questions on revenues, and so there was no real hard disagreement when it did fail. Then we went back in, and that's, like I said, out of the frustration of not being able to forecast and everything, we brought out the financial plan. The financial plan proved that, in fact, you could afford a bigger school. But you got to remember also that town's end of it was only around 72% reimbursement. You're only talking about funding about $6 million.
In August of 1994, Alan Brown was hired as the new school superintendent, replacing Dr. Joe McKeague. Brown felt the new middle school would alleviate the town's school space problems, and later that year, the Finance Committee came back to town meeting with another proposal.
Well, it was a tough sell in that the town is very conservative. The town had not built a new school in 24 years, so there was not a mindset towards school construction, and we really needed to capture the attention of the voters as to the severity of the overcrowding and the tremendous relief that this school was going to provide into the future.
I mean, we toured the schools, okay? When they were talking about 28 and 32 and 34 students in a classroom, Selectman Hunt and I, unannounced, toured the junior high school, for example, okay? Did we find classes that had 28 to 30 students in them? Yes, we did. We also found classes that had 0 students in them. So, I mean, the picture that they drove in everybody's mind, they always showed the Allen Avenue School where the kids were on the auditorium stage, where having classrooms in the hallways. Well, sure, they made it look that way. But there wasn't, in answer to your question, there was not severe overcrowding in the schools at that time, in my opinion.
Basically, when we went in and did the final reports and did the final financial plans and capital plans and all the other things that were done, it proved to us that, the town would be much better off, both financially and for the schools and the town in general to build the one school and to fund it.
When I got on the school committee, I was not one in favor of the middle school. I thought at the time that other options were available and that we should look into those rather than go for the big amount all at once. And in the time that I was there, I did come to agree with the people and learning the information, the population, where it was going, how the numbers were going up, and I did come to the point where I agreed with the middle school.
In October of 1994, the Finance Committee proposed the building of a $22.5 million middle school. The proposal would come to a vote on December the 5th, 1994, at town meeting. The Board of Selectmen was in opposition to the Finance Committee's proposal, which set up a community debate. One side was led by Selectman Louis Lima and Don Hart, who did not think the funding was fiscally possible. The other side was led by Finance Committee Chair Mike Thompson, who was confident in the proposal and believed the town could afford the new school.
We based our evaluation on what the town treasurer told us. I mean, again, he told us in March of '94 that we couldn't afford it. Well, that's what we have a treasurer for. He's the guy that's got to bond it. He said we couldn't afford to bond another $3 million addition, never mind a $25 million middle school.
Because you couldn't put a whole financial plan together unless you looked at all the revenue that was coming into the town and then turn around and looked and said, we've got to place this revenue where it belongs. And we didn't go in to pull money away from this department to feed this department or anything like that. We basically funded everybody. And so you got a landfill, you're bringing in income from it, it's got to pay for itself and it's got to put money aside, no different than we have to put money aside out of the tax rate and stuff into a stabilization fund to help pay for the school.
I remember coming upstairs that night from a selectman meeting, and the Finance Committee was discussing the proposal to build a new school, and I talked to one of the Finance Committee members in the hallway, and I said, what do you think? And they told me at that point, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to do it. We really can't afford it. So we felt comfortable with that. You know what came out of that meeting? $22.5 million middle school.
All the documents were out there. Everybody knew exactly what was being done. And not once, until we came out with the actual financial plan, did they even question it. And the spreadsheets that we put together and developed were actual numbers. I mean, they showed prior years. I mean, we went back. I think if you look at the original spreadsheets, they go back to probably 1991 and 1990 at the time. And we showed town meeting the revenues and how everything was progressing forward in '94, and then 5 years out from that.
The voters convened at town meeting for the opportunity to present their arguments on whether or not North Attleborough should pass funding to build a new middle school. Those who were for the funding believed that their research proved the town would be able to afford a new middle school. Those who were against the funding believed that the financial plan was incomplete and too optimistic on revenues.
The school committee had prepared a lot of documentation to be supplied to all the RTM members, to the press. It was talked about. I know school committee members had gone out to PTAs and whatever group would want to ask questions. I know Superintendent Brown was out and around doing everything he could to gain support for that building. And I think when it passed that night, the school committee had proved the point that the space was needed and the town could afford to build it without bankrupting, closing out other departments.
I mean, it wasn't just the Finance Committee, it was the town treasurer. The town treasurer put a huge amount of time into this whole thing. Also, the town accountant. She was the one that created all the spreadsheets. I mean, all the documentation that you see and the way that it's presented and how in the format that it's presented in, it was all created directly from the town accountant. And it was those formats, that is still used today that were created way back then to simplify everything for the town and to show the numbers exactly where they were and how they related to each other.
For lack of a better word, that town meeting was a joke. It was an absolute joke. Because that town meeting opened, first of all, it was stacked. It was stacked with school parents, school teachers, all school supporters. The auditorium, I had never seen that many people in that one time before at any type of a town meeting. But the moderator opened that town meeting by saying, quote unquote, everyone in attendance would have the right to address the school building article, whether you were for or whether you were against. It didn't work out that way. If you play back the minutes of that town meeting, and I was there, I know what happened. You play back the minutes of that town meeting, you'll see that it was 2 for 1. For every 2 people that spoke for the school, 1 was allowed to speak against it. And I knew in my heart when I got up that night at town meeting that I was going to lose any chance of re-election by saying to those people, and I had to tell them, somebody had to tell them, that we couldn't afford this school. And it wasn't an easy thing to do. And you know what happened? I think if they had tomatoes and lettuce, they would have thrown it at me. It was a very hostile environment for the people who were not supporting the school, was a very hostile environment.
Town meeting voted by a margin of 81 to 33 to approve the $22.5 million bond for the new middle school. The vote was just 7 more than the required 2/3 needed to pass. Immediately, the vote was challenged. RTM member Eugene Mullen organized a petition to take the question to the voters. The petition had 1,000 signatures on it when it was submitted to the town election office on Tuesday, December the 13th, 1994, 2 days ahead of the filing deadline.
There's certainly, a bumpy road in getting it done. There's always some problems with a project of that size. But I think they felt at the time that the building was needed, it could be afforded, and they voted for it.
That whole election basically was set forth by the Board of Selectmen because they were so adamantly against the vote. And at that point, I looked at it, the Finance Committee and a lot of other people in town basically looked at it and said, this is nothing more than another political tactic come back in, to shut the school system, to shut this thing down. And we looked at it exactly for what it was.
$23 million sounds like a lot of money, but when you're talking institutional construction like this, $23 million for a 180,000 square foot building is right in the ballpark where it should be. The project could have been funded through the State Department of Ed for several $1 million higher than that. They would have reimbursed on more. We didn't build an expensive version. We've built a moderate version.
The Board of Selectmen did oppose the funding of the middle school in North Attleborough for one reason only. It was not fiscally responsible. We believed that we could not afford that middle school. That's what we believed. Now, you can play with figures. You can make figures say whatever you want them to say, okay? But you can't, in the long run, orchestrate a program that you can't afford to pay back.
The question was taken to town residents on January 23, 1995, with the vote to build the new middle school passing by 158 vote margin. Superintendent Alan Brown said it was a victory for the children of North Attleborough, while Selectman Louis Lima encouraged the townspeople to put all the controversy behind them. In February, however, a recount was requested of the special January election, and the original results were upheld. As the project moved on, the school building committee was allowed to spend $1.2 million on architecture and engineering work so that the plans for the school could be submitted to the state by the June 1st deadline. The deadline was essential since it would guarantee the 72% reimbursement to the town from the state school building assistance program. The school building committee chose Castle Booz Associates of Connecticut as the architectural firm for the project.
Some of the things that Castle Booz brought to the table that impressed a lot of the members were their knowledge of building schools, their past performance in other schools. We took field trips. Some of the members took field trips down to see facilities they had constructed in Connecticut. And when all the factors were weighted in accordance with the law, then we felt that, I think pretty much unanimously, Castle Booz was ranked in the #1 position.
Castle Booz selected the land in front of the existing high school as the site for the new school. There were plans to build the new school in back of the high school, but the land had been filled in the past, and the quality of the subsoil was unknown. It was also determined that the middle school's front entrance would face the high school's front entrance.
And I think at first they thought about putting the building in the back, and there were a lot of questions about access, building roads going around the high school, how buses would come in and leave students off. Would students have to cross the road depending on how the bus traffic came and went? And I guess there were some other questions about the suitability of the fill that was out in the back of the school.
The school plans were submitted by the June 1st deadline, and in July of 1995, state officials approved the project for 72% reimbursement. Despite the positive news, however, a problem persisted. The School Assistance Act, which governs the reimbursement formula, was approved for 1 year only, and the earliest the project could receive legislative funding was the summer of 1996, a full year away. Because of the wording of the town meeting article, the project could not start until the funding was approved.
Because we knew that there was going to be roughly a year delay in the building of that school. And when we put the article together, we specifically stated that, you know, the way that the article was worded is that you couldn't put a shovel in that ground until the state guaranteed, you know, we had that 72% reimbursement, signed, sealed, delivered. And we did that for a very good reason. We did that because of the prior years, from 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, where the state kept saying, yeah, we're going to give you this much money, and it would never come through. They kept cutting it, cutting it, cutting it. It was the state, basically, that forced the town to go into deficit spending. I mean, not that they actually spent it, it's just that we were in deficit, so the town had to cover that money that we should have been getting from the state. So in all honesty, I didn't trust the state.
And the problem became the state did not authorize the school building law for the usual 5-year period. They did it for 1 year, which knocked us out of the loop, which meant funding was not guaranteed. It's been in place for 40 or 50 years, but it wasn't law, so we waited a year to be able to start the building.
One of the points of contention was a connecting bridge that would link the new middle school to the high school. Cost estimates of the bridge ranged from $300,000 for an exposed concrete walkway to as high as $700,000 for a covered heated walkway.
I was against the bridge, and the sticking point on that, although I'm not bashful, I always say what's on my mind, was that it was the superintendent's idea at the time, Alan Brown, and he was very much in favor of it. And it's not always wise for an administrator to publicly take a position directly opposite to his boss, but I felt strongly enough about it that I didn't think it should be part of the plan. So we disagreed on that. At least I said to Alan afterwards, at least it illustrates to the town that you and I aren't, quote, in bed on every decision, that there's room for disagreement.
Whether it had pros and cons, I think it came down to be immaterial. I know Alan Brown wanted to see the bridge. Maybe some of the administrators didn't want it. Some people on the building committee felt they didn't need it. Some people in the general public thought it was extravagant. But I think Alan Brown's original thought for it was a valid one. It's nice to connect the two facilities so they could walk back and forth. It would be taking supplies back and forth, the student population back and forth. But it was hard to visualize then the enormity of that span.
And to me, it was not worth the money. Wilson Whitty and Alan Brown, you know, I certainly listened to their opinion, but they won't be there forever, but that building will be.
On Thursday, August 22nd, the school committee voted 5-1 to remove the connecting bridge from the project. Chairwoman Pamela Flynn was the lone supporter of keeping the bridge. The decision left the new middle school without an auditorium of its own. Superintendent Brown fought for the bridge and in the end said he would have been far more aggressive in pushing for an auditorium if he had known the bridge was going to be eliminated from the plan. In October, 6 companies submitted bids for the job of constructing the school. A North Attleborough firm, Westcott Construction Corporation, submitted the lowest bid of $18.8 million. In November, Westcott was awarded a contract that would pay them $18,447,000 to build the school.
We bid it very aggressively, and in fact, our bid price turned out to be only $39,000 lower than the second bidder. And ultimately, that's how we got to be the general contractor, the lowest eligible and responsible contractor to bid that school.
So you have to look at what bid is the lowest and what bid delivers what you've asked to be bid on, to the same specs, the same specifications, etc. So you get the same quality of merchandise. So it wasn't so much that we selected Westcott because we liked him over another contractor. It was because by law he was the lowest bidder, he met the specifications, and that we were bound by the law to award the bid to him.
With Westcott building the school, interviews for the clerk of the works position were being conducted. 5 candidates made their pitch in an open session held by the school building committee. One of them was North Attleborough resident and Department of Public Works Chairman Ernest Sandlin.
My experience proved that I could do the job, so there was no problem there. That's the field of construction that I'm in. As you get over 40, I remember my mom and dad says once you get to 40, your body starts to feel it. Well, after framing houses or whatever else I was doing in the schools, I always worked on schools too, in the construction trade. You know, start lifting doors and everything. It's time to look for something where you can start using a pencil instead of a hammer. So that's why I chose to go off into another part of the construction industry.
Well, again, we put out an RFP, a request for proposal, based on the advertisement for the clerk of the works and the job description. We had, I believe, 3 to 5 candidates submit answers or documentation in response to the request for proposals. There were 2 or 3 other firms that submitted requests. However, some of those firms were quickly ruled out for various reasons.
When Ernie Sandland was hired for the clerk of the works position for the Martin School addition, the Board of Selectmen had asked him to resign from the DPW. An exemption, which would have allowed him both positions, was voted down by a 3-2 margin, with his DPW position cited as a conflict of interest with the Martin School job. This time, however, the Selectmen granted the DPW a blanket exemption from the state's conflict of interest laws. After Sandland was offered the position, Town Council Robert Bliss told Selectmen that Sandland did not need an individual exemption, since he would not be making any decisions that directly affected the contract for the new school. Sandland accepted the job, and construction of the new middle school began. Early on in the excavation of the site, many rocks were found underneath the surface. Because of the large amount of rock, a lot would have to be dumped somewhere on the site or otherwise hauled away by the town. One of the dump sites for the rock was behind Kelly Field near Janice Lane. One resident, Dave Redding, was informed of the rock dumping the night before it was scheduled to begin and expressed his disappointment in a letter to the school building committee.
They had so many rocks, the size of rocks, anything over, I think it was 4 cubic yards, they could charge the town for. And that was when it added up to a certain amount, and I think it was 1,000 cubic yards, then they had like a credit of 1,000 cubic yards, the building committee. Anything after that, the contractor could charge us for the large rocks. So if you looked at that site, from when the high school was built, there were some big boulders there that were left there, that were in the way. I numbered every one of those boulders, because one, you know, with that boulder there, I didn't want to get charged twice for it. So we went around numbering them. And in the end, that added up to like 500-something cubic yards of rocks.
We decided to put them on school-owned property that abutted Janice Lane. And what we did is simply extend the Kelly Athletic Field at the same level, and we used it to fill in that area. Some of the residents were complaining, but I think it was the reasoned judgment of most of the committee members, and certainly mine, that I don't think their complaints were warranted.
The contract documents anticipated that ledge was going to be removed and directed us very clearly right in the contract plans by way of drawing a circle and defining an area adjacent to Janice Lane where we would have dumped that rock after we removed it from the footprint of the school building, which we did, just as we were supposed to do. Obviously, that raised concern on the part of some folks, and having raised that concern, the town of North Attleborough then elected to have all of the rock removed and crushed at the borough sand and gravel site.
Unfortunately, on Janice Lane, the neighbors felt as though the encroachment of that was coming too close to their property. They lost that natural screen of the trees, and I think, you know, in the end, that that area over there will be loomed and seeded, and there will be no problem.
On March 1st, 1997, the selectmen signed off on the middle school bonds, indebting the town to $22.8 million in school construction costs. On March 21st, 1997, the official groundbreaking ceremony was held, with students from North Attleborough elementary schools participating.
Today marks a day of great celebration for the town of North Attleborough. It is a day that we celebrate the support that this community has given in constructing our new North Attleborough Middle School. Back in December of '94 and January of '95, when the voters of North Attleborough said yes to this project, they chose to alleviate severe overcrowding that we have faced for many years in our district. They chose to create for us a 21st century center of learning. 2, 3.
No, I wasn't prepared. I went to a few preliminary building committee meetings, school committee meetings, because I was interested knowing that the building was going to be sited here, how it would affect the high school, short-term and long-term. Also met with the construction company at one of their preliminary meetings, and I remember a quote, I can't remember the author of it, but I remember a quote from one of the individuals involved with the potential construction, and that was, "Mr. Whitty, don't worry, you'll never even know we're here." And that was far from the truth.
One of the problems with the new middle school being in front of the high school was the disruptions a construction project can bring to an area already populated by 1,000 students and faculty.
We made very sure that the actual access into the school, as I said, was segregated from our site by what they call Jersey barriers and by appropriate fencing. And by signs that directed traffic. And prior to the time that we actually started construction, we met with the school administration to show them what our plan was going to be, to hear their concerns, to adjust our plan to meet what may be concerns on their part that we had not thought of. And I think ultimately and finally, it worked very, very well. From my position, I'm not aware of any issue that arose related to the access to and from the school site, or any interface between our construction activities and the school that caused any problem for anyone.
Okay, well, probably the first thing we can say when we talk about this mayhem that's up here is disaster. I've been here since day one, 1973, and this was a great place to come to. We had a beautiful facility, and it took a lot of pride of the people that worked here to drive in the morning and see this facility and see the grounds the way that they were laid out. This has totally all disappeared now, and I don't think this will ever be the same again. I do have a brand new car, and a car that I really enjoy driving. It's a convertible, and I love to drive it with the top down. And it was so bad up here this past season. I got home at one time and had red mud on the windshields and the mirrors and the side windows. So I finally had to go out and buy a car just to drive to school. So this is my new pride and joy. So I've been denied the opportunity of driving a new car to school, and I have to rely on this transportation now because I was ruining my investment, was what it boiled down to.
No, I heard like 2 weeks after they started that 2 weeks that they'll have a new road and everything will go smoothly again, and we were like waiting for that, and it never happened, and now we're told that it's not going to happen, and we have these, we each get our own lane and going back and forth, and like even after school, now I have senior release so I get to get out quicker, but even getting out is a pain in the butt.
For a while there we had, it was delayed 10-15 minutes in the morning because cars couldn't get in. At times it was due also to the ice and stuff because people had to drive slow to school, so it backed up even more. And even in the morning, the trucks have no consideration for people coming to school. They'll cut you off right in front of the cars and whatnot. It's been pretty much a hassle all the way, the whole way through.
The entryway has been divided in half. It takes 15 minutes to leave school. It's got all this different, all the noises, the explosions going off during class, stuff like that. It's kind of disruptive.
And one day the parking lot's open, one day it's closed, one day it's a gravel road, one day it's, and it's not a fun place to drive into in the morning. The traffic jams out front, and I think it's a heck of a compliment to our kids that they've handled it the way they have. And you know, I don't know about some situations where kids might start to rebel a little bit about it. And I think that's indicative of the type of kids we have. You know, they make the best with what they're given and pretty much appreciate what they get.
Well, we've had some logistical problems. As you know, initially the building was going to be placed to the rear of the high school, out on what is now the ball fields. And the building committee made a decision after town meeting that the front of the high school area was the contour of the land was going to be better suited to the design of the building. So the decision to move it out front occurred after my involvement in marketing the need. It's created some logistical problems that we've had with traffic flow, having to close down certain sections and detour traffic. That's created some inconvenience for us. Some of that was anticipated. I think there have been times when there's been more inconvenience than we thought was going to occur.
Probably the other thing that has been a real hurt up here has been the lack of courtesy as far as the construction workers themselves are concerned. It's like there aren't the 800 people that attend this institution every day don't exist. You drive out, they want to cut you off. They're going where they want to go, when they want to go, and if you get in the way, that's your tough luck. We had an ambulance up here the other day for an injury, and the ambulance driver was trying to get out and got cut off by a 10-wheel truck. A couple of people last week during vacation were up here for athletic events and parked down in this area to walk over the hill, came out to go home and couldn't because this trench was dug. And so it's just a lack of, it's like they're building this new structure out in the middle of a field somewhere, and there isn't anybody else.
And it is dangerous, and I remember one time a girl had a seizure a couple weeks ago and they couldn't get the ambulance in to help her. The ambulance was driving on the sidewalk because there's a traffic backup. So it's very dangerous to the safety of the students.
I didn't think it would be as much of a problem as it has become. I mean, they told us that this would be this problem would go away soon as far as with the traffic. They would build a new entrance and exit, and that'd be done by Christmas vacation, and then it wasn't done. Then they said, well, it'll be done by February vacation, and it still wasn't done. And now I don't know, they just keep telling us the next vacation. So I'm hoping after April vacation we'll have a entrance exit.
There were no delays. When the entire site plan for the school was engineered by a traffic engineering facility that was working in conjunction with the architect to lay out the best traffic scheme. We have to decide whether there's one or two entrances. We have the main entrance and we have the additional entrance on Landry Ave, which is just an entrance only to the middle school, to the back of the middle school, which is what you see from the front on Landry Avenue. Those were designed by a highway traffic engineering firm for maximum flow, so that there were no delays in construction because of that. We knew what we had approved in the site plan. They would be built at the most opportune time during the construction process.
Well, I think it's good that, you know, they have the junior high coming in and stuff, but, you know, I really think that they could have started it in the summertime or something, and then, you know, had all the roads and entrances and exits all done away then, you know, and all set for the new year, next year. You know, I really think that would have been a better idea.
In June of 1997, Alan Brown announced he was taking the job of Superintendent of Schools in Canton. Assistant Superintendent Dr. John DeGoes assumed the role of acting superintendent. Some in town believed that the timing of Brown's exit was suspect.
When Alan Brown came on the scene, and I had a little semblance of respect for Alan Brown, but I realized and recognized right away that he had a salesman quality about him. And I think that, I was quoted as saying the school committee hired themselves a salesman, and he did a good job. But we knew, the Board of Selectmen knew, that he was not here for the duration. We knew that all he wanted was, on his resume, that he got the $22.5 million middle school passed in North Attleborough. And it's not $22.5 million, it's $37.5 million, because you've got to put the interest on, but they never wanted to talk about that. But, you know, sometimes change is good. Nobody likes change. But I think we change school superintendents a little too often in this community. And every one of the time we change, they all have a different projection, they all have a different program, and they all have a different direction where they want to take this community. And I think that's wrong.
That I would leave this job because of the middle school is in fact absolutely ridiculous. The school is ahead of schedule on construction. The school is within budget, despite what I read in the newspaper from some of those who were critical back in '94. The fact remains that the school is within budget. It is proceeding in a very, very positive way. And I have no worries whatsoever that when this school is done, it will be ahead of schedule, it will be within budget, and it will be a source of immense pride for the community. My leaving, one of the regrets of my leaving is that I won't be here to see that project through to finality and to be part of that school's future. So it's absolutely ridiculous that I would be looking to leave because of that. That's going to be just a wonderful adventure for this community.
The differences with the school committee, Alan did lead. He would go forward, he would make decisions. And there were certain people on the school committee who did not like that. That there were people who micromanaged the office and felt for some reason that they were not the board of directors of the school under ed reform, but that they should be able to call a superintendent and have him respond or do what they said to do. And that's not the role of a school committee member. And as that continued, there were two people who stand out, and they just continued this. And in evaluating the superintendent, it was, well, I didn't get what I wanted. And I find that appalling that they would do that, because I certainly was not there to see what I wanted done. I was part of that committee, and we discussed issues and we voted on it. And for people to think that they should be able to direct what happens in the day-to-day operations is just wrong. And I think when the opportunity came up for Alan, looking at what was happening with that, he got a tremendous opportunity to leave North Attleborough.
Hi, my name's Ernie Sandland, the clerk of the works for the middle school project in North Attleborough. I've had this job since November of 1996. My duties are basically to watch the employees that are here to make sure the town's getting a quality job. In this situation, we have an excellent contractor that's working for the town and their subcontractors, and we have an excellent architect. And I think the plans and specifications, other than a few loopholes, we've had a good set of plans and specifications to work for. As you can see in this 175,000 square foot building, looking at now currently our administration wing, which is in the first floor level, and as you can see in the backdrop, the existing high school, that would be the entrance that the students will come in. At this point, you can see in its rough stages, the building is at the point of concrete slabs being poured. Bare beams are going to be covered by, as you can see, the gray area, that's fire protection, fireproofing. That's a sprayed-on material in case of a fire that the beams will hold true. The steel walls and the block walls that are currently going up in this main section over here behind us will be also divided up like that in this administration wing. This section here is the D building. It's a 3-story educational wing, and the center core here, what we're looking at, is also the attached media center. There'll be a window wall here overlooking the educational classroom wings. The building is divided up into pods. They call them pods. Each wing, like the top floor, will have the 8th grade. The center floor will have the 7th grade, and the lower level will be for the 6th graders. This section is designated for the 8th grade classrooms, whether it be the lab or the standard classroom. And if you would move over to your right section here, there'll be a future wall up here where you won't be able to look out here, but that's our gymnasium that is under construction. And this part on the lower section here is where all the mechanical and the shops are going to be. There's a woodworking shop, and then there's a computer-generated shop down here. The mechanical, I mean by mechanical, the boiler room, and the compressors will be over in the right section. The gymnasium, and it's an interesting thing. You can see the block, standard gray block there. Then we have some white line block. That's a sound deadening block. So when the gymnasium, I don't know if you've been into most gymnasiums, when there's a lot of people in there, the tends to be a lot of noise. And what they've looked at with the roofing system they're putting in there and the wall system, they're saying the acoustics will be a lot better in that gymnasium. We have a roofing company, Titan Roofing, currently working on our roof here. This is a rubber membrane ballast roof. There's an insulation barrier there that is being installed along the edge there. As you can see, a skylight. Those skylight frames that you see that are outlined on the roof, they will be in the administration main lobby area, heading towards the gymnasium.
In August of 1997, a 100-year storm came through the area, causing excessive rain and flooding. Houses on Laurelwood Drive, a neighborhood right next door to the middle school, were exposed to massive rain runoff from the construction site.
Well, during August, there was a heavy rain, and it was in the middle of the construction phase when they had just torn up the tennis courts and the parking lot in the back. And the water from that area had nowhere to go, and there was minimal diversion of water. There was minimal restraint of anything. So the water just, where in the past there was drainage and there was a direct path for it to go, there was nothing. So the water continued to flow and build up, and before we knew it, it was against the silt fence, and then it just came over like a waterfall and just started pouring down. Before we knew it, it was the Colorado Rapids that was coming directly through Randy Gano's property across the street and into the street and into my property.
Now behind my house, because of the construction, they have to have a silt fence with hay bales and just to keep all the silt back, not to keep water back. Well, in fact, what had happened is water had come down there with a bunch of silt, had built up behind these hay bales. And the hay bales are, you can be about a foot thick. There was a couple hay bales high, so we get about 2 feet of hay bales with the silt fence. The water had built up so much behind this silt fence that the hay bales let go. The silt fence came down in a portion of it, and about a standing 2-foot wave came traveling at my house.
Those people I felt for, I tried, and I did. I actually did work very hard to make sure whenever there's a rainstorm that they weren't inconvenienced. And I can remember one time, and I feel bad for the family it happened to, and it's reality. The contractor was digging a set of stairs over by the tennis courts, concrete set of stairs. And it started to rain, and he forgot to put some hay bales or circle it with something to retain the water, because in that back parking lot, there's close to 215, 216 parking spaces back there, and it's a large area. And all that drainage heads towards that area where there's a catch basin that takes it and brings it to a detention basin, and then it sends it down a swale, which sends it across Laurelwood. Unfortunately, what happened there is the water gathered, and it broke through whatever he put there, came across the tennis courts, and went into his property. That's the Gano's. And I had called the fire department and the electric light. They came over, disconnected the meter, because he had about 3 feet of water in his cellar.
I can tell you right up front, we take no responsibility whatsoever for the effect of that unusual and heavy rain. Prior to the start of the construction of this facility, the natural slope of the land directed water from what ultimately became the middle school site down towards Laurelwood Lane. For the millennium, when rain fell, it ran in that direction. Nothing that we did on the construction of this school, or none of the plans for the development of this school site, changed that in any way. The natural slope of the land continued down towards Laurelwood Lane.
Some of the flooding just occurred during the reasonable use of our land for excavation purposes, and some of the flood control measures and the storm drains weren't in place. I think there may be 1 or 2 Laurelwood Drive areas that are still have some concerns, but Laurelwood Drive is a private way, and some people bought their homes along a drainage easement that was granted to the town by the developers of that private way. So there's a certain amount of caveat emptor or buyer beware that has to go along with it. They knew or should have known that they were buying a house along a drainage swale, and that if that overflowed at some point in time, their house may be at risk.
What I'm most upset about is the way that we were treated by Westcott, and the way that Westcott really had no disregard, no regard whatsoever for us as the residents, and didn't come to us and talk to us about what was happening. And when we did ask for them, anytime we have called them, they have not returned our calls. Anytime they actually came down to our street, which they did several times, they were very arrogant and just had no, nothing good to say, no sympathy at all for us as residents.
We were shown a video that was taken by one of the residents of Laurelwood Lane, showing water running down the embankment and across their street and down through some of their property. What I find of interest is, while that video was being taken by that resident, one can clearly hear right on the tape the voice of a woman resident on Laurelwood Lane who says clearly, "This is the same thing that happened to us last year." Well, last year in that time frame is a point at which we were not even on that site. It was long before the project had been bid.
Westcott had moved in, and they took that 3 acres of land with that tennis court and gouged it out because they needed to replace it. They had left that site, I don't know how many weeks it was like that, but they dug out a hole, and a hole such that those 3 acres now were a funnel, straight funnel right from my backyard. Well, lo and behold, it rained. The water came rushing down and went right into my backyard and flooded my basement. No landscaping at the time. I came home for lunch because my wife was again hysterical. Well, this was the first time, second time was in August. But she called me, so I came home and I called Westcott immediately. I was angry. Got a hold of somebody immediately. It actually was a foreman and somebody else, and within 5 minutes they were at my house. And I was shocked that someone responded that quick, but I was very appreciative. They came up and they assessed it. They take a look at it and said, "Well, you've had water come down here before." And I said, "I agree. I have had water come down here before, but there was 3 acres of grassland to soak up some of that water before it hit my property." I said, "It wasn't an issue, but all this water coming my way is an issue." And I said, "And we're supposed to get rain in the next couple of days. If something's not done, I'm going to get this happening again. And I don't want this." And he took a look at it. And what they did within the next couple of days was put a big dirt pile in the way so the water could not come rushing down. So they in fact did do something about it, and it solved the issue. And from then, I contacted my landscaper because I said, "Well, if I'm going to get water to come down here, albeit gradually, I want to landscape the property where the water goes around my house and away from it." And that's when that landscaping came in, and that's what that landscaping was designed to do. To allow water to come down to my property when it had to, but it would not go near my house. But what happened on August was pretty atrocious, and I'm kind of confused why Westcott lost sight of the first incident, which they did readily take care of and do something about, and acknowledge that there was, they needed to do something. And then in August, when this happened, how they lost sight of all of that, and it was pretty atrocious what took place.
Another issue that arose during the construction was the school building committee's decision to replace the tennis courts at the high school. Due to the design of the middle school, the original plan was to rip up 3 of the 5 courts and replace them with new courts, leaving 2 existing courts. The school building committee, however, wanted to replace all of the courts and also add an additional one. The group reasoned that replacing all of the courts at the same time would prove more cost-effective since they all would fall under the 72% reimbursement from the state.
Those old tennis courts were situate right in between the 3 new courts that we were building. Because of the state of disrepair of those old courts, we looked at either replacing them or again repairing them. If we repaired them, they would not be eligible for reimbursement. They had been repaired continuously by the school department over the years. Each time they're repaired, they'd crack again and they'd become in a state of disrepair. Again, because they were not properly constructed in the beginning, because they had poor subbases, etc. If it would cost more to repair those courts than it would be to build new courts when you factored in the 72% reimbursement.
I think we were concerned that there were other areas that the money might have gone to at the time, because we were starting to consider furniture and equipment for the building. And I guess I just really say we weren't really happy about it.
And from the beginning of the tennis court project, we were told that they would be ready by April 1st, so I anticipated maybe having to transport our tennis team for a couple of weeks to another facility, not the whole season. But you know, as we got deeper into it, we realized the problems, and thankfully Ernie Sandlin, who is the clerk of the works, is a fellow that's well known to most of us in town and has kept us pretty much abreast. And I can't think of the nightmare it would have been without Ernie and looking out for our interest.
And as we looked into it at the time, cost-wise, it would have been it was more cost-effective in the long run to rip them all up, because when they pave the tennis courts, they don't pave them individually. They pave one large area as if they were paving a parking lot, and then line them off and fence them thereafter.
We laid down the gauntlet to the school committee. You don't have to approve this new court in your ed plan. We're still going to build it. The effect of it is, if you don't approve it in the ed plan, you've got to pay $1 for it. I think the cost was around $50,000. If you do approve it, we get 72% reimbursement. The decision's yours.
On July 1st, Rick Smith was hired as the new principal of the new North Attleborough Middle School. Mr. Smith is a North Attleborough resident whose past experience included teaching at the high school. He is a firm believer in the middle school format.
This is a job I would not have taken if the community had made a commitment to middle school. And the greatest reflection of that commitment is the $24 million price tag associated with this particular building that has been designed specifically to facilitate the middle school format. And it's pretty well entrenched in North Attleborough for several years. My predecessor, Dr. Stromberg, was committed to that format and put it in place.
As the fall of 1997 approached, plans were in progress for equipping the school with technology and furniture. One of Rick Smith's major responsibilities in the project was to create 3 budgets for the building committee. One was for furniture, another for equipment, and a third for technology.
We put together actually 3 different proposals based upon the amount of money that we thought might be available. And in one proposal, we had everything that we have today. And in a third proposal, actually, we had no computers in the classrooms and no teacher computers, and I think we had 3 computer labs, and that was just about the end of it. So we knew what we needed, and we knew how much money was available in the building committee's budget, and they didn't equate, so the decision was made to approach town to augment the building committee's budget.
I think most folks will say that when the plan was put together, they estimated out the construction of the building. I just don't think a tremendous amount was put in to how we're going to furnish it. I think they might have used some estimates or just some loose guidelines for the size of the building. And when the time came to start doing it, plus the fact we had lost the year in waiting for the state school building assistants, and they started putting the list together, and it was coming up short. The numbers just were not going to be there.
At the time, Smith estimated that $1.2 million would be needed for salaries and supplies for the new school. As we began 1998, the new middle school was going into its final phases of construction. In January, the school committee asked the town for a $4 million budget hike, and in February, Dr. Richard Hoffman was hired as the new superintendent of schools.
At the time, I was working as a school administrator in Lawrence, and I had just finished my doctoral program, so I kind of tossed my hat into the ring and starting to look around for a superintendency. And one of the things that drew me here was the fact that there was a building program going on, and I had helped build a school, a K-8 school in Lawrence, and so I was very interested that the community, has decided to expand some of the building capacity. And it sounded like a really great project, so I was very drawn. One of the reasons I was drawn here was because of that middle school.
With the hiring of Smith as principal and Hoffman as superintendent, the town got two people who are well-versed and committed to the middle school format.
And the middle school is really a very different concept, the whole idea of bringing all of the sixth graders into that middle school environment where they'll have multiple teachers, where they'll have a whole different, really a curriculum geared by time spent on a subject, and then you would actually, physically move to another subject area to another teacher's room. And I think the middle school philosophy is a good one. I mean, I subscribe to it. I think that kids who are, 12, they're ready for that. Most of the school systems in the state have a middle school model. And I think it does help to provide a smoother transition for the kids, kind of get them ready in sixth grade and have them in the building. The way the building's designed, it's beautifully designed for a middle school model in terms of the team approach.
Middle school level, what we do is we assign students to teams of approximately 120 students in North Attleborough, and each team consists of 6 teachers. And those 6 teachers have the same 120 students each and every day, and they teach English, math, social studies, science, and world language and special education at grade 7 and 8. And at grade 6, we don't offer world language, we offer reading in lieu of world language, and the other subjects are in place. So basically what you have are little schools within the school. There are 3 teams of 120 kids per grade, and that gives us a total of 9 teams in the building.
I think it's more of a nice way to get the kids starting to think about subject specific. And in 6th grade, the curriculum changes quite a bit from 5th grade. It's not so much an interdisciplinary approach anymore. It's a little more content specific. And I think it makes sense.
How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ernie Sandland, clerk of the works for the North Attleborough Middle School Building Committee. The date today is February 9th. And it's around noontime. We are now currently on the 3rd floor. This is the stage of the construction on the D wing, which is the educational wing, the 3 floors of the classrooms. Walls are being painted as we speak. Grid work is going up into the ceilings. Light fixtures are being installed. Electrical on walls are being installed. Currently on the other levels in the computer labs, the particular electrical is being outfitted in those areas. The media center, there's a lot of work being done in the media center. Cafeteria, that area is being pretty much moving along at a pretty good clip. Same thing with the kitchen. Gymnasium, locker rooms, they're going along at a pretty good pace. Most of the walls that had to be put up are up. Exterior is in good shape. All brickwork is done. Roofs are in. Thank God, no leaks. And we're also looking at the outside utilities starting up again. This is a typical hallway. When you start to look at the glazed block, there's a blue glazed block there. And that's, for any kind of destruction as far as, somebody writing something on the wall, this is where the lockers would go. But the glazed block is a plus. It was a little bit extra when they bid, but it was well worth it. The durability is going to be there. If you remember, I think it's typical to what the elementary schools have in North Attleborough. They have that brown glazed block, and a lot of the elementary schools, I know Falls, School Street, Roosevelt have it. And Anvet Boulevard did something similar. They used the mosaic tile on the side. Well, this takes the place of that. Some schools that are being built nowadays are using just a regular block, and they're painting the walls. And I just don't think it's going to stand up. And what we see is a typical hallway above the ceiling. Once the ceiling's in, we have what we call a cable tray. Now this is because technology is such a moving target. Wiring schemes will change, you know, whether it's a Cat5 wire or some other wire for the future. That cable tray will always be there. We won't have to be snaking wires through walls and that. In every classroom, which is going to be great. We'll be able to put new wiring 10, 15 years from now for the computer system if it has to be. There's a distance. I don't know the exact length of this hallway, but the nice thing about this school is there's a boys' room and a girls' room on each corner. So the kids in each classroom, whether it's math, English, science, do not have to go down a level to go to the bathroom, which is good. And then team teaching, they have also a teacher's planning room up here on the left. You know, everything's right in this little core, so it's going to be a useful tool for the principal to work with.
I think that the vote is still out on the middle school. The jury's still out as to whether or not this community can afford it. When I say they, I think the financial wizards of this community will tell you that everything is okay, that yes, we could afford the school. Well, if you turn the clock back on a little over a year ago, we almost had a new middle school with no furniture in it. Because they had to come back to town meeting for an additional $1 million or whatever that number was, okay? And so they knew in the very beginning they could not build and equip that school for $22.5 million. They knew that in the beginning.
On March 2nd, 1998, a special town meeting was held at the junior high school to vote on additional funding for the new school. Many were adamant that without this funding, the school would be open without adequate furnishings or state-of-the-art technology. Due to the original wording in the town meeting article, school construction had been delayed for over a year while the town had waited for the legislative funding guarantee. This delay led to escalating construction costs and the need for the school committee to seek additional funding from the town.
A good case was presented for it, and I know there were people who were upset that, you know, here they come again looking for more money, and it's difficult to go back and say, well, you know, we can do this for this price. We expect this to be enough. And you know, you just come to the point that in the couple of years, whatever the amount of time between when you started and where you are today, things change. And what we thought we could do a few years earlier really, you know, wasn't going to happen. And yet we didn't want to turn around and open up the building and have no technology of the age. You know, the computers and things like that, because these kids need this stuff.
So that even though the initial architect, which I think working with the school committee back then was Earl Flansburgh and Associate, their initial cost estimate was probably reasonable in the time it was generated, but at the time it went to design and construction, there simply wasn't enough money to do everything. And I think that's what the school committee realized, and I think that's what town meeting members realized, that because of the way they fashioned the vote back several years ago, that times changed, the economy has changed, and it was a boom economy, and simply more money was needed. And I think what they understood too is that they had under-budgeted this project. They were allowed to spend more. You know, the state would have budgeted $4 million more for this and reimbursed you at that 72% rate.
Favor and 12 voting against, the recommendation carried.
And I don't know how tomorrow's going to go with the chief.
Well, that's why I don't want to
just
go substantial compliance.
And the chief is talking to the designer, just to let you know. Okay, so it's to that point.
Yes, this is not a question.
Right, so I'm saying
They say in the movies, it's your problem, not ours.
On the Ansel system.
No, sir, it's not.
It is.
No.
We don't have to say, we need a certificate of, I need to see a certificate of occupancy before we see vote substantial completion.
That's fine. And all I'm telling you is that the Ansel system may not, and it looks like it is not, directly my problem. We are working it out, and it's got to the point where the chief is now involved with the designer.
Right. Well, whose problem is it? I give up, but enlighten me.
Well, since I haven't spoken to SAR or the chief this afternoon, I can't tell you if it's simply something that's missing or something that has to be added. It would appear at this point, from the conversations that took place this afternoon, that the fire chief feels it's something that has to be added to make it work the way he wants it to
Why
work.
did we wait so long for the last 99 hours for this to check? I mean, this is what, you know, at the last minute, what all the design problems should have been solved 3 months ago.
Well, I understand, this isn't a big, if it is.
It isn't a big,
it's not
Don, it isn't a big problem. It did get brought up, there was a directive. It appears that maybe the directive may not work. That's what we're trying to work out. It's down to that last item, and like Mike says, is it something that he would like to see, and it's easy to accommodate it and be done with it, that's all. And we will find that out when he gets back here tomorrow with
It
it.
may require an additional connection to do what he wants.
And we will do whatever we have to do tomorrow to satisfy it.
With the summer of '98 winding down, Westcott did not meet the substantial completion date, and there was a delay in getting a certificate of occupancy. Because of this turn of events, school officials could not hold the orientation they had planned before the first day of school.
We had the foresight in this building committee to specifically define in the contract that substantial completion included the certificate of occupancy. Because you could have a building that would be 99% completed in the inside and outside, but if you don't have a certificate of occupancy, you can't use it for the purpose of it for which it was intended. So you could have this magnificent structure without an occupancy certificate, you can't use it for anything. All right, so that we were wise enough from a building committee standpoint to interrelate those two definitions as one, so that we felt that Westcott's duty was to perform. So that when you heard about some of the newspaper articles that were written, that, well, the building committee isn't done, they should accept it, they shouldn't accept it, how come it's not done? As a building committee, we have one thing to sit back and say, it's Westcott's obligation, and in this case it was Westcott, but it would have been any general contractor's obligation to get the work done. If the building inspector found problems with the school, or insisted certain things be done before he granted occupancy, or the fire chief would insist on certain things, that's an issue between those inspection departments and the contractor.
I don't think that other than the time that that project was impacted by the blasting and removal of ledge, that there were ultimately any delays in the anticipated construction sequence for that job. As I said, we blasted and removed ledge for a solid 2-month period. I think the contract completion date for this project was July 1st of 1998. In fact, we ultimately finished that job just about September 1st of 1998, which is the same 2 months that construction was displaced by the removal of the ledge. Perhaps in a little bit of overconfidence, we felt that we could accommodate that 2-month delay within the contract time. Well, it didn't turn out. We didn't get it done on July 1st. We got it done on September 1st.
We opened the building on time, under budgeted, had everything that the kids needed to when they entered the school, and you didn't see any construction equipment hanging out there when those kids showed up. When they showed up, it was a brand new building. In fact, we were open a week before. We were open in the middle of the summer, but there was some minor things we had to do. But we were open there a couple of weeks before school opened for people to come through. So it wasn't a photo finish, by all means. It was well planned out, and you know, looking at the history of what Westcott does, I think they did a decent job for the town of North Attleborough.
There was always a big problem from where I sit with deadlines, because I often asked Ernie, with whom I did most business, who was asking the subcontractors and Westcott and so forth when things would be done. The paving of the parking lot, for example. I was told it would be done the first week in August. Then it was going to be done the second week in August. This is while the parking lot is still dirt now. I have school opening up here the Wednesday after Labor Day, and every time one of those deadlines was cited, many times it wasn't met. And finally, as I recall, the parking lot was paved at the 11th hour, the day or two before the Labor Day weekend.
I got to mention one person that really helped me quite a bit, the Fire Chief Coleman. He was real good to us over there. He, you know, like I said to the chief, I get my work out every time you come over, because in every room, and he warned the contractor, you know, don't put the ceiling tiles in because I'm going to look above every ceiling. And the contractor had a superintendent there that had this attitude that he's going to do what he wants, at some particular time, and the chief said, listen, don't put the tiles up there. I need to look above the ceiling. The guy said, I remember I was at a project meeting. He said, put the tiles up. I don't care. He puts the tiles up. Now, when the chief gets above the ceiling, it's dark, and he starts to see openings that he probably wouldn't have seen before. Now, this contract is taking tiles down, fixing areas that he should have probably fixed before, but it just came back to haunt him. And he learned on the first floor, and believe me, he didn't mess around with the chief.
When I walked the building with Paul DiChiara, the building inspector, I was most impressed with his approach. I think he was doing a couple of things. First and foremost, I think he was protecting the children and the staff, and making sure that we were all going to be safe in a building that had met all of the codes and expectations of the state. But secondly, I also think that he was making sure that he did everything he could to ensure that the general contractor was going to complete tasks that they might not have wanted to complete so timely, at least, okay? And when he says you can't come in, then that put pressure on everyone, but it also included the general contractor.
On the morning of Tuesday, September the 8th, Building Inspector Paul DiChiara finally issued the Certificate of Occupancy. The new North Attleborough Middle School opened its doors to students for the first time on Thursday, September the 10th, 1998. Although the school was fit to open, the arrival of 1,100 students on the first day of school proved a stressful time for administrators.
We had 1,100 children coming to this school who had never stepped foot in it. Now, in a normal school year, you're going to have about 350 come to your school for the first time. What you do the year before in the spring, and we will do this in June for our incoming sixth graders for next year, is have an orientation program, and also have an orientation program for parents. Well, we planned orientation programs for the last week in August, and I know people in the community planned vacations around those, and we had to cancel them because we did not have an occupancy permit.
Some of the last-minute issues had to do with handicap accessibility. And some of those things, we didn't actually fix them all before school opened. And they were things more like in one of the bathrooms, the sink, wasn't quite at the exact height that it should have been. And it should have been at the right height, but it didn't prevent us from opening. So those were most of the issues, and then some of the other things had to do with just like air handling systems in the kitchen. Some of those were just barely done at the last minute. We were even talking with the food services director, do we send a note home and say brown bag lunch for the first week? And she was like, no, I know we can get this done. And I was like, well, don't wait too long, in case we have to send home 1,100 notices. But she pulled it off.
Now that the school is built, some still wonder whether or not this building will alleviate the town's school space needs. The former and current superintendents believe that the projected population growth in town may warrant another building, but not until the end of the next decade.
We said in '94 that with the construction of this school, the space needs of the town would be effectively met for 10 to 15 years. I stand by that today. That was in '94, so if we go out to 2004, 2006, out into that range, our elementary needs will still be met at that point. Our fifth grade needs in the old junior high will be met. The 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in the middle school, by the end of the next decade, by 2008, 2010, that school will be reaching capacity, but that's the 15 years that we talked about initially. We didn't make promises beyond that. The town is continuing to grow very rapidly. We are taking in 200 plus new students every year, and you can do the math as well as I do. When you're taking in that many new students every year, you project out 10 to 15 years, and you've had enough new students move in to warrant another building.
The tricky part about North Attleborough is that, the neighborhoods are growing fairly rapidly. And when you do an enrollment projection, or if you hire an outside company, they don't really look at housing starts as much. They look at births at the hospitals, they look at enrollment trends. And if you have a growing community, sometimes it's hard to get a handle on it. And I think here in town, people are a little nervous about what could happen with potential housing starts or development out, especially on the other side of the mall, that whole area out there where some of the farmland is. And there are a lot of housing permits now that the planning board has approved, but some of them aren't being built yet, but they could be. You know, and growth is a good thing, but when I look at it, I see, you know, 2 and 3 children, and if they're costing me $5,000 a piece and they have 2 or 3, you know they're not spending $10,000 or $15,000 in property tax. I mean, you know, obviously. So I have to look at that too in terms of the growth and how am I going to educate the students based on just, you know, the property tax that are brought in by each one of those homes.
In conclusion, the school cost the town $23.5 million, plus the interest on the bond. Those who were involved in the process were pleased to be a part of it. With the North Attleborough Middle School being the largest public construction project in the town's history, it took a lot of effort from many individuals to complete this endeavor. In the end, the new North Attleborough Middle School contributes to the town's commitment to education into the 21st century.
When we embarked on this, I knew very well, because this was the largest project that the town had ever undertaken, you know, not only in cost but in sheer size. You know, and I knew, you know, all the battles and everything that went on just to build a high school. I was in high school at the time. In fact, it was my graduating class, 71, that was supposed to be the first graduating class out of new high school. Well, we didn't make it because it failed. So I knew there was going to be, you know, there was not a lot of support at that point in time to, you know, to build something this big. So we knew that whatever we put together had to be right. You know, I mean, it had, you know, there could be no mistakes. There could be no mistakes.
As to whether or not the middle school is going to be successful, I certainly hope it is. We do have it equipped now. We do have a lot of students in there. I think they're learning themselves. To quote a dear friend of mine, he said, when you have a product that is costing you less money, we call, in the private industry, we call that success. So when we keep saying that the students in North Attleborough are at the middle, not the middle, at the bottom of the rung when it comes to spending per student, but we turn out a good product. And how do we do that? We must have a good program in education to do that. So we don't, we need to remember that the Board of Selectmen did not and was not against education. As a matter of fact, after the referendum vote passed, we supported it. We said we would, because it's what the people wanted. The people went to the polls and told us, we want the new middle school, and we said we would support it, and we did. So again, I wish everybody well. I hope that in years to come that the funding doesn't catch up to us, although I suspect it will. I think that this community is still heading for some dire times when it comes to financial responsibility, and I think that we're going to pay for that eventually.
I'm proud to have my name on that sign out front where it says Alan Brown, Superintendent of Schools. I'm proud of the work that we did in marketing this and putting a political action committee together. I'm proud of Ed Trost and the leadership that he brought to this project, and the literally thousands of parents that were involved in marketing this. It's the largest single project that I've worked on in terms of school construction, and it's a source of immense pride to me. I'm very proud of the role that I played. If I had it to do over, there's not much I'd change.
I think I'd just like to emphasize that my explanation of not wanting the building sited out front was a personal one and shouldn't be interpreted as a position that this faculty or that the school department took. Obviously the school committee voted to put it out there. I just happen to disagree with them. Now that that's water over the dam, the building is built, it's there, obviously we're not moving it, we're living with it, and we'll cooperate with tenants out front, as I sometimes call them, because now they call me the shack in the back, and life will move on.
I've enjoyed, and I've appreciated, I should say, the opportunity to be involved in the construction of something that is significant as a school. You know, I've heard it said by someone with a lot more wisdom than I have that, you know, if many centuries from now, visitors come to our planet from another part of the universe and look at what is here, that the most obvious sign that we are a true civilization is that we built schools for our children. I believe that that's probably going to be true.
2 children were in there, I would say in the middle of August, and 2 young girls. And I had said, geez, what are you doing in here, girls? She said, well, we thought we could look through this. So I showed them a couple areas. They were really inquisitive about what the school looked like. And they said something to me that will stick with me the rest of my life. They go, you know, Mr. Sandlin, I introduced myself, people in North Attleborough must really like us. I go, what do you mean by that? She goes, both of them go, they built us this school to go to school. And I, you know, think about that. You know, what is that passing on to those children, that we're really giving them something to be proud of? And I'll tell you, when people are proud of something, they take care of it. And those kids are taking care of that school.
You shouldn't take on an obligation like this unless you understand it's going to be a lot of hours. It's all unpaid. You're probably doing more work than you bargained for. But it is a way to help the town and give something back to the community. Those are the reasons I decided to do it. I think that if you work in the community, if you live in the community, you should give something back to the community. And I've said this before. I think I said it at the inauguration of the school and the dedication, and I've said it at the Martin School, and I try to say it to the children of the town every chance I get, is that if our children see us committing a substantial amount of time to public service, whether it's elected, appointed, whether it's through non-political types of things, whether it's League of Women Voters or simply beautifying an area of the town through the Park and Recreation Department, our children learn by example. If they see their parents devoting substantial time and energies to a project such as this, and they know it's unpaid, then I think they're going to learn from that.
I went through it, I think originally back 10 years ago, 8 years ago. I didn't feel that that was the answer, but you know, in learning about the population, the growth, the costs of alternatives, I came to agree with the middle school. I think that in time people look back at this, for all the divisiveness there was, that they will look back and say this was a great thing that was done. And we have a wonderful education center up there on Landry Avenue. With the, you go up there any time and there are kids out on those fields all the time. The classrooms are busy. There's always something going on in these schools. The high school is one of the centers of town. And I think, you know, people built that school and they had the same opposition then. And I would hate to think where we would be if that building hadn't been built or had been built 10 years later. It's just, it's a wonderful center of everything that goes on. I mean, meetings, all kinds of activities. And I think that in the long run, the town will be extremely pleased and happy that they did put that building up.